One mic, one voice. You can change the world, it's your choice. One mic, one voice. You can change the world, it's your choice. One mic, one voice. You can change the world, it's your choice. One mic, one voice.
Welcome to the One Mic, One Voice show, building the collective conscience, a show that is created to give space where your voice, ideas, and informed opinions can be heard, appreciated, and debated. I'm so happy to see all of you here today. We have a very exciting event that I think calls for us to come together as Black men to talk about the challenges that we face in this country. And I have reached out to some men that I know have their hand on the pulse of what's happening in our country. And in our brief discussion, it's important that while we are the victims of this violence, no one ever asked us to speak. And so today, what we want to do is give you an opportunity to hear from us. I think Black men are in pain, deep pain. And so who better to describe this lived experience than those who are going through it? In this conversation with me is my dear brother, Jamal Rahman, who is in Delaware. He is an activist in his own right. He leads the library system there. I have known him since graduate school. He is more than a friend. He is a brother from another mother, as they say. And so I'm so excited that he is here to give his analysis. Jonathan Thompson is here. He is in Tulsa, Black Wall Street. This young man, I'm gonna call him a young man because he's younger than me, but he is a dynamic brother. He used to work for the mayor's office. We had a conversation with him down in the Greenwood Center a couple years ago, but I have fell in love with this brother because he not only loves social justice, but he also puts his heart into it. Alonzo Hill is here. He's in Flint, Michigan. And we know about Flint. We're more aware of the challenges that they face. And he's also in the library system. He is a man. He reached out to me years ago. And when I first encountered him, I recognized his greatness. And I recognized that he was a gentleman that didn't let anything hold him back, regardless of the challenges that we face as Black men. And he spoke into my life in a time in which I needed that. And so I'm so thankful to have him here. And then also we have Brother Timothy Parker, who is in Oakland. He is here. He's an MC, a musician, an artist, a social activist that speaks truth to power, not just through his music, but through his life. So we are so fortunate to have everybody here. I hear some background noise somewhere. Let me mute. There we go. We good. And I see many of my friends, my colleagues on here. It's a joy to have you. We're probably going to go. This is an hour and a half event. We're probably going to go about an hour, and then we're going to open it up for questions. The chat will be open, and we want to hear your reflections, your questions as we go forward. I want to start off. When I thought about this and what this could be, I really had George Floyd in mind. This might be an emotional conversation, so don't, men cry too. So don't be offended, right? I thought that would be the centerpiece, but then I saw Atlanta last night. And I saw what happened to that brother as he ran and fled, and as he really fought for his life and ultimately lost it. So, Brother Tim, if you could briefly just reflect on these recent two events and how they made you feel and your reactions to them.
Well, I felt like, I try to be an optimist when I can, as much as I can, even though the world we live in is the way that it is. When the coronavirus was attacking, in my mind, somewhere in my naive, optimistic mind, I was thinking, okay, if anything might bring people together, regardless of culture or anything, maybe this will, because this is something that all of us as humans are facing. But then I start seeing, the same stuff going on, and, the people in China against blacks, the people in America against Asian people. And then to see George Floyd, I'm going to be real honest. When that happened, I mean, even yesterday when I saw the brother in Atlanta, Brother Brooks, I felt like I'm down there. I'm an artist, so I'm a bit of an abstract thinker. So sometimes I have to check my mind because it can travel. And I was like, damn, is the world coming to an end? I know it's not, but it's just kind of like, wow. In this time, this is the last thing we need. We already used to it because it's been happening, our whole lives. But in this time, for something like that, in any time for something like that to happen, at this point, I feel like, and I think that the good thing is that, I saw a lot of people of different cultures marching in the protests and in the protests. And I think that the voice of the voiceless is louder than ever. All I can say is I'm angry and I'm fed up. And at one point, and I don't know, maybe I still feel like this. I feel like it's going to be up to us to really rise above, as they say, as Black people. Because at one point I still might feel like they ain't coming for us. We got to get on some Marcus Garvey type mentality. We got to do it for each other, with each other. And I'm not saying to separate ourselves completely, but that's all. I'm a bit all over the place, but those are some of the thoughts that come to mind. The good thing, I guess, is that they're trying to pass some kind of legislation to check the police. But the main thing I could say is I'm angry and I'm just fed up, and I'm like, what is it going to take? Like a natural response would be to attack back, but that's not going to come out good for anybody. But I'm a little frustrated. I'm angry, and I'm tired of it, man. I've dealt with police violence I saw my sister and her boyfriend get beat up outside of my house when I was like, I had to been like 11 or 10. So it's something that keeps happening, and people, and I have people that I know that are other cultures and other races, and you're absolutely right. We're not heard. In fact, I think white supremacy brainwashes everyone. I think that there are even some white people that might be good people and might not want to do no harm to nobody, but they have been brainwashed because every time they see Black people on the news, they see crime, and they don't show a lot of our triumphs and our victories. So, it's I don't have all the answers, but, right now I'm just kind of like, I feel like the best thing we could do as a people is unite. But that's a whole other book in itself. But those are my beginning thoughts, as
Brother
well as
Alonzo,
I can express them.
Brother Alonzo.
Yes, sir.
Your thoughts?
It's horrible that it even happened in 2020. I'm upset, just like anybody else is, of what happened to George. But police brutality is about as common as catching a cold in this society, unfortunately, and it's something that we need to work out. amongst everybody. And I think that also with this quarantine globally or internationally, should I say, it built up the perfect storm for everybody to get out there and protest and make a difference. I just hope that we keep our foot on the gas pedal and make some policies, some laws, and all this other stuff to implement real change, because marching is basically just symbolic. We got to get some real change.
Brother Jamar?
You know, the first thing that's the most disconcerting to me is these incidents or these lynchings have exposed the impotence of our judicial system. The big thing what we're finding is that, you know, justice rests on social media shaming. You know, the only way that victims of police brutality experience any kind of, even a scintilla of justice, is if somebody's there to record it and expose it and it goes viral. And so that is something that's an uncanny, you know, that's a crazy precedence that, you know, here it is that we're being governed by Twitter, and that's our executive, you know, our executive branch. I mean, it rests in Twitter, and our judicial system rests in social media shaming. You know, me personally, the thing that I struggle with, and I just, you know, I'll be as transparent as I possibly can, is that these incidents are happening so quickly and so consistently that I find myself becoming desensitized. I mean, if you remember years ago, you know, when you watched the news or you read a headline that somebody was murdered, it startled you, it petrified you, and now these things are happening so quickly and so frequently that I'm just becoming desensitized, because it has become the new norm. And so when you become desensitized, desensitization and apathy seem to go, you know, hand in hand. And so I have to fight to not become desensitized and to not become, you know, apathetic, and to not look at this head on or face to face, because it's too painful.
Brother Jonathan?
Yeah, I think those are all great points, especially with Jamar, where he kind of ended just now, talking about the fact that he's been desensitized, or that so many of us have been desensitized to seeing, you know, especially young Black men killed on the camera. As I sit here and think about the statement that he made, I realize how true it is. I've seen so many Black men die, especially on camera, obviously, because we see it over and over and over, and we can replay these scenarios and these incidents in our mind and know all the details about it. And as I sit here and think about it, I really can't think of very many times I've seen on camera or recorded, you know, people of other cultures die, which would mean that, you know, when I see it, I would feel more shock. But I've seen so many young Black men die over and over on camera that it really has just done a lot to us, you know, as far as our mental wellness. And, you know, it's just very alarming just to see something like that, so traumatic over and over. But about this situation here, what really hits me is, you know, I've always had try to be solution-based, and anytime I give public comment, I try to provide ways that, you know, we can help to restructure the system, or we can help to, you know, be advocates, and a lot of it would be very politically driven. But what's been so sad about the most recent events is that I've noticed that so many of the things that I've always talked about and advocated for, we have actually been doing in these cities where a lot of this is happening. Things like, you know, we've always said we needed, you know, more minority representation in government. Well, at least in many of the cities that we've been seeing a lot on television, you have Black mayors. For example, we see a lot of DC, a lot of Atlanta here lately. But these are people who actually even have Black female mayors. And in many cases, as with Minneapolis, we have Black police chief, who is actually ahead of that program. And those are so many things that, you know, we've been advocating for a long time, and it's saying if we could just get the right people in the right leadership modes, a lot of this will stop. But so far it hasn't. And that's what's been really disheartening to me too. And then one more point, just the fact, especially from as far as police reform goes, we've had some proposals. You've seen some cities talk about defunding the police, and others who have spoken about banning chokeholds. I think that's what Minneapolis did. But the problem is really beyond that. It's the fact that value of life and humanitarianism is not kicking in with the officers who are being caught with these murders. I struggle with this George Floyd situation because they're saying he was resisting arrest. How are you resisting arrest if you're already arrested? They're already on your stomach. And that's what's really, really bothering me. So when they say things like, we're going to ban chokeholds, I can only get so excited about that because it's not necessarily the move that he did, but it's the fact that he did it for almost 9 minutes. There could have been a way to have apprehend someone appropriately. And then when you see them begin to suffer or become too uncomfortable, the humanitarian in you has to kick in. And that's when you're there to help preserve life, to save life, and to make sure in no way that we lose it, even if a serious crime had already been committed.
I'm gonna be very personal with my take. It broke me. It broke me. And we're gonna be talking about trauma here in a minute, but I'm gonna tell you, to see that man beg for his life, it broke me. And some of you on here know this. I hadn't cried that much since I lost my mother. I'm still trying to process through the pain of what it means to be Black in this country. When we cannot get due process, we're citizens. We have every right, like anybody else, to be treated. And for that man to be down there for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, and for his spirit to leave his body, it broke me. I don't think I'll ever be the same. As a Black man in this country. I served this country. Alonzo served this country. And for us to be treated this way, it's a shame. So I say, where do we go from here? I don't even want to hear about reforms. We've been reforming forever. We have to transform the way this country operates, the direction that we're going in, from education to policing to healthcare. We need a transformation. I don't want to hear about reform, because the same people that are reforming the system are the same people that operate the system. Wow. And so if you can take anything from what I've said to you, how I feel, a lot of Black men feel. It broke us. Let's transition. There's always been this myth that racial profiling doesn't happen. I mean, I've been told countless times, those scenes, they don't occur. Police brutality. If the guy had only, comply. Well, we know comply. If you comply, you die. So this idea of racial profiling and police brutality. Talk about your experiences with this, Brother Tim.
I've been racial. Like I said, when I was 11 years old, I saw my sister and her brother and her husband being beat up outside of my house. I've had, police. I'll be in a car with somebody. I've be pulled over for no reason, no justified reason, and the police will just have an attitude. A lot of times it feels like you know, if you try to reason with them or talk with them, it's almost as if they talk to you as if you're less intelligent, and they give you this whole vibe and whole look like they've already demoralized your character just by looking at you, just by the color of your skin. They already figure that I guess they've already figured your character out in their mind. And you know, I've dealt with it. My family's dealt with it, and you know, like I said, man, and the same thing, the reason why you were saying, you know, you don't want to hear about none of the stuff you was talking about. That's why I said what I said in the beginning, man. Like that, it's gonna be up to us. You know, it's gonna. But then, the Black Panthers was a good thing, and they ruined that. You know, it's almost like every time we raise up and we say, all right, we're not gonna take this, they try to find some way to infiltrate and to break it down. So at this point, I don't know, man. Maybe we need to be the secret black society within society. Maybe we need to move in silence amongst ourselves and get a plan together, you know. But that's going to take all of us, you know, and we got to, and all of us, you know, even if all of us come together, y'all, we're still the minority, man. So, I mean, at this point, I would just say, you know, if I think if all Black and all Latino people in the world was on one accord, that would be very powerful, you know. But to me, I don't know how to get there, but the answer is unity, man. The answer is moving as one. And being that the voice is getting big, it seems like it's getting bigger with these things, even though it was just another murder yesterday. I don't know, man. Yeah. I think I'm talking about more than just my experience with police, but you know, it brings me to all these other things, man. But yeah, I've dealt with, and I've had friends get beat up by the police. You know, it's just when you grow up in a Black community, and I grew up in a Black community that wasn't necessarily a high income community. You know, you're right. You get desensitized. You don't get desensitized to police messing with you, but it becomes the norm. It's not a shock anymore. It only creates more disgust, you know. But yeah, that's me.
Brother Alonzo.
I've been racially profiled plenty of times. One time in particular, me, a Puerto Rican guy, the Hispanic lady I was with, and he was with a white woman. We were going into this hotel in Lacey, Washington. So the white girl goes in, and then he goes in and tried to get a room. They told him no, he needed 2 pieces of ID. So he came back out to the car and told me that, and I went in. I had my Michigan ID and I had my Army ID. So I go in, I pluck it down on the table, and the guy said, verbatim, "You don't get it. We don't like your kind staying in our hotel." Mm. So we ended up turning around, but my friend wanted to bust out the windows because we both were angry. I was like, "No, we don't need that kind of trouble. Let's just go." You know, I've been through on the hood of my car a couple of times, and I had just got my master's. I was having tacos over a friend's house, and a car, SUV pulled up. It was about 4 different cars pulled up right by a church. Unbelievable, but right by a church. They get me out the car, slam me on the hood. And my friend looked at me and was like, "What did you do?" I was like, "I haven't done anything." You know, I gave him my ID, and then the lady said she was looking for, I had a Dodge Neon at the time. She said, got a Dodge Neon, a 2-door Dodge Neon, had committed a crime, had shot at somebody on the other side of town, right? So I'm like, it's a 2-door. I'm driving a 4-door, so why would you even pull me over? So she pulls out a notepad, and it did have Dodge Neon on it. It happened to be my birthday. So although I had some drinks in the car, we poured them out, and she told me to enjoy the rest of my birthday. So I thought, you know, it was kudos at the end, because they actually could have gave me a ticket or took me downtown, but it was just unfortunately that I was profiled with the 4-door when it was a 2-door that did a crime that was possibly about 4 miles away from where I was at. I was nowhere in the vicinity. No, so it's unacceptable.
Brother Jonathan.
Yeah, I remember being about 16 years old when I first had my first kind of instance that was pretty unforgettable. I was in Coweta, Oklahoma, which isn't too far here from here in Tulsa, but there's nothing down there but a bunch of cows and dirt. But I was down there working at a fireworks stand for the 4th of July, and I was working with my little brother who was about 3 years younger than I was, and I remember a particular customer who came up. He was an older white man, and he got a little frustrated because we couldn't find the type of fireworks that he wanted in our stock, and he ended up calling us coons, which is kind of an old school way of saying something derogatory to African Americans. You don't hear it as much nowadays, but it was something that was said to us when we were kids, and we went to straight shock. I mean, I wasn't on any response or I'm going to tell you what I think about what you said or anything like that, Michael. I was just shocked and just didn't say anything. I was a little nervous and felt intimidated to say anything because of where I was and the fact I didn't really know anybody else around. So it was just something that my brother and I were quiet about, and we tried to talk about later on that night. Again, like I said, he was 3 years younger than I was, so he wasn't even familiar with the term at all. But I remember also just a few years ago, as far as law enforcement goes, I was just returning to Tulsa from Oklahoma City Thunder basketball game, and that's about an hour and a half away. And I was driving with my wife, and we got back home around, it was a little after midnight from being on the road. And I got just a few blocks away from my house, and I realized that a car was following me, like very, very closely. And I was very alarmed because I didn't know who it was or why I was being followed so closely, but it was very obvious to me. And I was really nervous about that, as was my wife, who was my fiance at the time. So I was so close to my house that I decided to go ahead and go home. And I pulled right into my neighborhood and right into my driveway just to realize that that car had decided to block me in my driveway so that I could not get out unless I would have just tried to put the thing in reverse and just run right into them. That was an option. The other option was to just stay where I was. And I remember just wishing, because I had no idea who was behind me. I'm about to get robbed, and I'm wishing that I had a gun. I did not have a gun on me for my protection at that moment. So I opened my car door, and that's when I looked behind me to realize that it was undercover officers, members of the gang unit, who decided to get out of their car. And by this time, they were approaching me. And I relaxed a little bit just because I knew it was law enforcement. They weren't in uniforms or anything like that, but they had their flashlights, and they were walking up to the car. And just had just the silliest reason to not stop me, but to follow me, saying that they couldn't tell where my license plate was from because it was a Chicago or Illinois license plate. It was my wife's car at the time, and that's where she's from. And then they apologized, saying they didn't mean any harm or to spook me. But I look back at that moment and think, if I had a gun, which again, I was really wishing I would have had one, I would have gotten out the car with it. And then I would have been facing an unknown person. I didn't know their identity. I didn't know they were law enforcement until they were 6 feet in front of me. And I would have had a weapon in my hand, and they could have said, oh, he had a gun. And who knows how that story could have played out. And now I look back on it, and I'm happy I didn't have a gun because of how that story could have played out. But it shouldn't have come down to that, since I didn't break any rules, no traffic infractions or anything like that. They were simply profiling my neighborhood because it was the African-American part of town. And I was a black driver with a black woman, and it was late at night, and they were taking their chances to see if anything was in my car with their flashlight.
Brother Jamar.
Well, I've had several, interactions with cops, but the one that I think has probably been the most scarring was a few years ago when I lived in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. Mount Pleasant is a suburb of Charleston, and it is it's an affluent white city. And if any of you have ever been down south in July, you know and understand that it is, the temperatures there, it's 2 degrees less than hell, So I used to walk in the morning, so just to be wise and beat the heat, I got up at 4:30 one morning and went walking in my neighborhood, and I was just walking, and I got pulled over by a police officer, and he asked me what was I doing there? Could he help me find something? Was I lost? And I explained to him that I lived in the area. And so he asked me to show him identification, and I just said, well, I don't have it on me. So he asked me for my name, and he ran, they ran my name, and he asked me the same questions over and over again, I guess, in an attempt to try to catch me in a lie. And then he said that I was staggering, while I was walking. So he made me take a sobriety test. So I had, I'm a law-abiding citizen. I live in the area. I paid association fees in the area, and so I just had never felt so humiliated and demoralized in my entire life. But he eventually let me go. So.
Well, I can tell you, if I started rattling off all the times that I've had encounters, pulled over from the police, we would be here for the remainder of our time. I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'll give you two incidences. One was in Menominee Falls, which was a predominantly white area. I took my car just outside of Menominee Falls to get some work done. And back in those days, it wasn't called ATMs, they were called time machines. Y'all remember that, the time machine? And so I had to go get some money. And the mechanic told me, he said, well, the bank is about a block up, so just walk up to the bank and pull some money out. And as I was walking on the sidewalk up to the bank, police officer passed me. He made a U-turn, and then he pulled right up in front of me on the sidewalk and said, where you going? I said, what do you mean, officer? And I explained everything to him. And he said, let me give you a ride. I said, officer, I don't need a ride. He said, you don't understand. You make a lot of people nervous in this area. So I had to get in his car for him to, you know how humiliating that was for me? To get in his car, get my money, and he drove me back to the auto repair shop. Kenosha, Wisconsin. I'm coming home from work. I'm dressed in a suit and a tie. I see a detective behind me weaving in and out of traffic. He pulls me over. I turn around. There's at least 6 police cars around me. They get me out of the car. I said, what's going on, officer? He says, there's been a robbery in this area. I said, what did it look like? I said, because you just saw me from the neck up. They searched my car. This was in a very busy area where people were coming by, were staring at me. They kept me there for about an hour. He threw my driver's license to me and went on about his business. I filed a complaint. The attorney told me they pulled over every black guy in that area that day. And it turns out when they caught the suspect, he was white. Okay, that's
wow.
That's just, I could go on and on. And but this produces, and this is what I want those of you who are not people of color to understand that this produces what we call racial trauma. Living with trauma every day of your life. I mean, the pain, the resilience that one has to live with trauma every day of your life. Not a moment, not a waking moment that you don't know that you're Black in America. But I want to talk just briefly about how do you, Brother Tim, how do you live with this sort of trauma?
Me personally, man, I think conversations like these are good. I try to talk to people. I try to make people, even people outside of the African American community, if they're open to it, I try to make them aware. For me, I meditate, man. That's how I deal with trauma. I recognize that I'm not really my mind, nor my emotions, or but that's a whole other topic. But I deal with trauma by realizing that the trauma is an experience I had, but it's not who I have to be all the time, you know. So meditation helps me get through with that. But then you got to ask me how I deal with my family members that are dealing with that kind of trauma. And at this point, I think Black people have always, they gave us the chitlins, and we turned, even though chitlins are not healthy, I'm not advising anyone to eat chitlins, but we turned it into something that for us was beautiful. And then you got to look at hip hop. We couldn't afford instruments, and we couldn't afford classes to play the instruments, so we took the records from our mothers and our fathers and a microphone, and we created a culture that's the biggest culture, probably in the biggest music culture in the world today. I think that Black people we took the N-word, and although it's a debate amongst people about it, but there's a generational philosophy that we took a word that was meant to harm us, and we turned it into something that now other cultures want to say it. And they're mad they can't, because we turned it into charisma. We turned it into something that other people looked at like they wanted to be like it. So, as far as we're going to get through this, I say that to say we're going to get through this. I think something drastic needs to happen. But before it's trauma, let me go back. I got off topic. For us trauma, man. I think the more of us that can meditate, stay level-headed, and stay clear enough to at least try to live in the solutions as much as possible, even if they're not right in front of us. We can't jump from A to Z, but we can go from A and we can take a couple of steps towards B and just keep moving. And until, enough of us stand up, that's all we could do. From my end, but hey, enlighten me.
Same to you, Brother Alonzo.
Knowledge itself helps me with the trauma. So by me knowing who I am and where my ancestors really come from, it helps me deal with the trauma of day-to-day living, and also meditating. Meditating helps me a lot too. It's a day-to-day struggle, putting one foot in front of the other, dealing with the trauma that you get in this society, especially being a Black man and looked at as a threat everywhere you go. Everywhere you go. I forgot my other bullet point I wanted to bring up. It just slipped past me, so you can go ahead and proceed. I can't remember it. It was a point I wanted to make.
All right. Jonathan?
My value comes from God. So, whether a man or a person of another race or my own race values my life or not, my value comes from God. And at the end of the day, my relationship with Him is what I stand on, and what gets me through any traumatic experience that I have. But also, the other side of that is, I'm married. My wife she hears me vent a lot. It's great to have somebody that I can talk to about, things that I've experienced or things that I see or go through, time and time again. And, I know everybody doesn't have that situation, and that's definitely a big way, a big mechanism that I have. And I just talk to her a lot and just try to she has the ability to soothe me. She has the ability to make me feel valued, and it's something I appreciate.
Brother Jamar?
I have found much of my fortitude has rested in community. I mean, I've had people I've had an inner circle like you and a couple of other Black men that I can call up and be transparent with, because I think that, we look at all this trauma in the Black male experience, and we see videos that are going viral. However, much of the trauma that we experience as Black men, we oftentimes don't have the words to articulate it to other people, especially in the workplace when you deal with microaggressions and you deal with covert racism. You deal with racism and experiences that you don't necessarily have the words to articulate, or if you did explain them to other people, they would think that you were insane, that you've gone bonkers. And so people like Michael Owens, I can give him a call and I can say, brother, this is what happened, and I don't need to. There isn't much explanation that's required. He gets it, and he understands it. And so I think Black men definitely need community. They need other Black men that are like-minded, that they can be transparent with, because they're the only ones that understand, our interior. Because our trauma translates into domestic violence, alcoholism. I mean, those are things that are symptoms of Black men that have been traumatized. And when you understand the Black male experience, I mean, I think a good thing for anybody that's in this video is this is a good time to check out Denzel Washington and Viola Davis in the film Fences. I think that's a very good didactic tool in understanding the interior of the Black male experience, because what August Wilson does so successfully is that he steps so deep into the interior of the Black male experience, to where, I mean, you look at this man, abused alcohol, he cheated on his wife, and many times we get distracted, by those are bad things, and we get distracted by those things. But what August Wilson does is that he helps us delve deep into the interior of this man's experience, to where we don't villainize the man for those things, but we understand the pathology, and we understand his experience, and consequently we have nothing but sympathy and understanding for this man.
That's that's an extremely powerful point you just made there. This idea of not knowing unless you know, and unless you experience that. And the brotherhood, there was a time, and I'm going to say this, and maybe we're getting back to that. There was a time when brothers stuck closely together. There was a time where I could be in Philly, I could be in LA. If I saw another brother, he would nod at me. He would say, "What's up?" He would give me that. Nowadays, brothers walk right past you. That sort of unity and being able to have those conversations with someone that understands your trauma is extremely important. It's and people will say, well, do you go to a counselor? It's really hard to talk to someone, as Jamar has pointed out, when you don't have words. The experience of being a Black man is you don't need words with another Black man. All you need is his presence. That's how I deal with the trauma, is I have Jamar, Alonzo, Jonathan, Brother Tim. I have those who I can talk to that understand that I might not have the words, it might not come out right, but they understand what's going on inside me and in my heart. And so it's therapy to have one another. And without that, I don't know where we would be. I think it's a survival mechanism for us to have each other. I guess I want you to understand that this racial trauma, and I will tell those on this video conversation to do some research about racial trauma. It's very serious, and it's with our young boys and young girls. They're exposed to it at an age, and they build up this resiliency to make it through life. I don't know how to remove racial trauma unless we, again, transform our society. We have a couple comments, and we're going to get to your questions here later, but I think a couple comments are worthy of mentioning. Brother Gerald says education and conversation like this is a good start. Information like what are microaggressions, those commonplace indignities, intentional, unintentional, and how they communicate negative and derogatory prejudice and insight. Well, brother, I'm gonna say go to my podcast on being a Black man in America, and I break down in quite detail the microaggressions. Brother Philip said the N-word should never be a word that needs to be embraced. I have a brother with a bullet in his head because someone thought he was an N. Finally, a voice put God first. So we want to get to your questions here in a little bit. But one question comes in mind, and Natalie's on the call with us that coincides with the next kind of topic we're going to address. Is Natalie says, how, when it's not the responsibility of any person to educate me, being a white woman, on their experience, can I express the desire to learn about the Black experience thoughtfully while recognizing no one has an obligation to help me? And I want you to keep that question in mind as we talk about our growing number of white allies and what advice do you have for them? And let's start off with Brother Tim.
I have a friend right now that I've been kind of going back and forth with that, we almost became enemies at one point. And he's a good friend, and he's done some cool things for me. I've done some cool things. He's helped me out in some situations. And we talked, and it occurred to me that that white people are brainwashed by white supremacy too. He grew up in a little city called Walnut Creek that's not very multicultural. And I had to sit down and I had to really break some things down to him. And it really made me see, okay, if I would have never had this talk with him, his whole way of looking at African Americans would have been through the news or through the media, and what he sees. And I think, my answer to that would be dialogue. I think that we have to all be able to, if we're gonna, because at the end of the day, if the ultimate for America is beyond race and it's citizens versus establishment, if that's what it is, I'm not saying it is or isn't, we're gonna need allies from other cultures because we are a minority in this country. So I would say dialogue, and everybody try to, when that dialogue happens, everybody try to understand, even if you disagreeing on first impulses, you just want to just, be violent or whatever, try to understand where the other person is coming from and why they are coming from that and what they might have learned or been taught, because everyone is programmed. We're all like computers, and we only know what we know through our experiences from birth to where we're at. Knowledge is infinite. The more you know, the more you don't know. But I would just say dialogue and then trying to understand each other as best as we can, and try to, and at the end of the day, realize that it's not about Black people being mad at all white people. It's about justice versus injustice. It's about being humane. And I think that dialogue amongst different cultures, I think that needs to be had, at some point, Brother
Alonzo?
Well, I entirely agree with his statement that we need to have honest dialogue with one another in order to figure these things out. How else would I know something about you unless you tell me, and vice versa. Also, there's a very good book by James Baldwin and Margaret Mead. It's called A Rap on Race, and they're just having a raw, uncut, unfiltered conversation about race in America in like 1964. Is dynamite in a book, pure TNT. It'll blow your mind. Margaret Mead, James Baldwin, Rap on Race. Check that book out and continue the dialogue with your friends of other ethnicities and get to know them, and they'll get to know you. And things are ironing itself out.
Brother Jonathan?
Yeah, I think the brothers have already really hit the nail on the head with this one here. But I just remember just the night last couple of weeks ago when George Floyd died. I had a white friend of mine who, we went to school together in college. We don't talk very often or anything, but I remember him texting me that night and asking me if he could call me that night, and it was around 11:30 or so. So very uncharacteristic or unpredictable. I had no idea I would be talking to him on that day, but he wanted to reach out to see how I was feeling and to see what I thought about the situation, and he wanted to see how he could be an ally or how he could best get acquainted with the struggle and do his part as well. So my thing would be just to make sure that you're truly genuine in the situation. Everybody who's out in the streets aren't always about the business, and things become trendy. And I would really say before you do anything, just really check, have a honest self-reflection. Why is it that I'm involved, or is this something that I truly care about? I'm looking at these different corporations, and everybody's all of a sudden saying Black Lives Matter, when 3 or 4 years ago, Colin Kaepernick was out there, put his neck on the line, put his job on the line, actually had a cost for what he was doing and what he was saying. And what's happened is you're seeing all these corporations, whether it's whoever, the NFL or NASCAR or Starbucks or whoever it is, they've calculated that Black Lives Matter is where the money is. And now they want to say that they've, been on this side and have always, understood. But, we have evidence that that wasn't the case. A few years ago, one man suffered greatly for stating it. Now you'll see almost every football player is going to be taking a knee this year all of a sudden. It's because it's become embraced. In many ways, it's been whitewashed, and it's become socially acceptable now. So please check, and you can only do it for yourself. I can't do it for you. You have to check with yourself with a true self-reflection. Do I really care about this situation? And if so, I'm going to talk to people in a genuine way, asking true questions so that I can grow, and you'll begin to find ways that you can do your part.
Jamar?
Well, my response is probably going to be a bit more kind of provincial, because I subscribe to a biblical worldview. And so the church has just been my life. And if you look at the historical work for the upward social mobility of people of color, it has always emanated from the church. You look at the abolition movement, you look at the civil rights movement, and then you look at today, where you have a white evangelical allegiance to a racist demagogue. I think that we need to understand that there is a dialectical relationship between Trump allegiance and overt racism. And so, speaking of white alliances, I mean, what I would call for my white brothers and sisters in the faith is to openly repudiate and sever ties with the religious right and Donald Trump.
I mean, it's I have been talking about that very thing for a while, and that the very principles of Scripture says, and Jesus said it himself, when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was in prison, you came to visit me, right? The very things of Scripture teaches us that we are to do unto others, right? That we have neighbors. And if we're not guided by that principle, then you can't label it as being anything of Christian faith. And I think a lot of Christians, white Christians in particular, have struggled with this idea of, how do I remain in this conservative view when I see these things happening before my eyes? And out of the abundance of the heart, one speaketh. I mean, that's Bible, as the preachers say. And so you cannot discount what a man says or a woman says to justify some support for policies when the most important thing is human life. And yes, I agree with everything that's been said. And Natalie Webb, your question is a very important one. What I want, if you have your pen, I'm going to give you some things. And this is not something you need to, do a exegesis on. But I'm just going to give you a few things that I think if you just go to YouTube and put this in, you will get sort of like a brief definition of what these is. Number one, you got to start with slavery. Number two, convict leasing, the convict leasing system. Number three, black codes. Number four, Jim Crow. Number five, redlining. Number six, mass incarceration. If you go through all of that, you will get a picture of the Black experience. And at every level, in every generation, Black people have been oppressed. Even though we have made strides, there's always been a pushback. After Reconstruction, after President Obama, after the Civil Rights Movement, we have to anticipate, listen to me, my friends, we have to anticipate, although we are seeing change happen, there will be a major pushback. How deep, how hurtful, I have no idea. But it will happen. Learning, the best way to articulate what's going on with Black people in this country is to understand the experience. You can understand it in an intellectual way, but I want you to understand it in a personal way. And when you look at all of these things, I just want you to say, what if that was me or my family going through those situations? How would I feel? So, great question. In the book, A Rap on Race, I think is really important. And also just being educated on what Black people have went through in this country. You can't get it in school.
No.
I mean, many of the folks on here didn't even know about the Tulsa race massacre until they got out of school and started living. Right? It happened right in Tulsa. You can't get it that way. So, and the other thing I want to say to our white allies, it's best to ask Black people, help me understand what's going on. I really want to know, right? Don't come from a place that you understand. Come from a place where I want to know. Help me, educate me, share with me that experience, because I don't know it. And I think Black people will be receptive to share that with you. But many times we see our white brothers and sisters come in, and when you try to share, they're telling you, all lives matter. Right? Racial profile is not that big of a deal. Right? I know good cops. Right? You're not listening. Right? This is the time to hear from Black people. I want to, we have just a few more minutes, and then I want to open it up for questions. And, sometimes this can be a dangerous thing when you open it up for questions, because folks, they're not questions, they're statements. And they're, they're monologues, right? And we don't want to do that here today. But I just want to talk about what is our message to younger Black boys? We have some educators on here. We have some mentors on here. What would you say to younger Black boys, beginning with you, brother Tim?
I would say that, you know, and this is not bragging on my part, but I'd say I've been successful. I've lived my dreams. I've traveled the world, and I grew up in the ghetto. Then I would get more people like me, and we have to put. When I grew up, the generation I'm from and where I grew up, when I was in high school, we looked up to the drug dealer, the gangbanger, and you know, maybe the pimp, because those were people in our community who, number one, and we're young, we're kids, so we're impressionable, and we're not the full people that we're going to be. Neither are the children of today. But those were the only people in our community that we saw that had money, had women, and had respect, and had a degree of power. So we got to go to the hood, y'all. We got to go. We got to spend time in the hoods, whether it's where you grew up or wherever, or at least if you know somebody in that area, because we got to bring more positivity, mainly in the hood. You know, all Black people, period, but mainly where people are really, really suffering. You know, I mean, this is what they see. And I can understand it, because I grew up feeling the same way until until the Creator blessed me enough to be able to get a career and travel the world and see the whole world and whatnot. Now my perspective is broader, and I'm older, but we got to give young Black people images. I would tell young Black people, you can do whatever you want. I would use them as an example, as myself as an example, not to brag, but to say, yo, I came from a pretty rough neighborhood, a pretty rough place, and it can be done. It can be done, because that was the main thing. When I came up, only people we saw doing it in our community were people that did elite, you know, that chose the street life or whatever. So I would, you know, tell young Black people that anything is possible. I use myself, and then any other, you know, any of y'all, anyone I could use and I would drill that positive example, the positive image and example of what it means to be a Black man into their mind. Because right now, for a lot of young Black boys and girls, the opposite is being done.
Brother Alonzo?
What I would tell the young Black males is to follow their dreams and find something that they love doing, and they never work a day in their life. And also to travel and see different places outside of your own community, if possible. Hopefully a mentor could take you somewhere to see something different. It's like a fish that's in a fish bowl thinks that's the ocean until you take a fish to the ocean. You know what I mean? So I think that is crucial in the Black community, for them to see something else and see how other people are living, and it can inspire them to want better. But if you're stuck in a downtrodden environment and that's all you see, you can't see your way out of it. So I think that's important. And by the way, I mentored for like over 10 years, and then I got burnt out, so I haven't mentored in a while. Okay.
Thank you, brother. John?
Thank you.
I really like Alonzo's point right there with exposure and just how significant that really is. And you know, we aspire to be what it is that we see. But I also think about just kind of my upbringing and how my family really relayed to me a very solemn message, but a necessary one, which was growing up, don't do anything to get yourself in any trouble. I mean, it's going to be tough enough already. And that was something I really had to understand early on. And whether it was fair or not, that's another discussion. But that was the reality that was given to me early on. It kind of helped me stay on the straight and narrow path to try not to get myself in any trouble. Because as we're discussing now, there's going to be some things that we'll have to go through anyways. But also, lastly, I would just say, find your identity in God. We're made in His image, and that really is, again, the main reason that it's worth waking up every day and living this life, which can be very difficult. But when you have that Andy. You definitely have the motivation to keep going. But also, and one last thing too, it really comes down to us as far as reaching back to the young guys because they need all the support they can get. And even when they want it, there's been some situations or even times in my life where I just didn't have anybody to go to, or I felt I didn't have anyone to go to, even though I had this yearning desire to link up with older guys or older brothers, even in my family, because I didn't grow up like with grandparents and stuff like that, grandfathers. One I've only met twice, and then the other one I've never even seen a picture of. So I've always had that connection or that lack of connection with like the older generation that I've yearned for. And with us having this type of talk right now, hopefully this will be a reminder for us to just reach back to guys and young guys who aren't even in our families, and even those who are.
Wonderful, Brother Jamar.
Well, I would say especially to kids in inner cities with limited resources, I would say the first thing is to seek sanctuary and refuge in your public library. And this is not a commercial, but a book and the resources that the public libraries can offer can take you places that your community can't, or your pocketbook can't. I think another thing that I think that is very critical is that I think that we have to do more than offer young Black men specifically. We have to do more than offer platitudes saying if you get a college degree, or if you have money, or if you travel, or if you do certain things, that your life is going to be good. I think that we need to be raw and honest, and we need to tell them that the road ahead of you is going to be rough. It's going to be hard. You're going to have some hard hills. You have some hard hills to climb. I think a big disservice that the older men in my life, did to me is that they made being a Black man look so easy. As a kid, you just thought, well, hey, my dad goes to work every day, but then he comes home and he's just so angry and so upset. But, you just don't, I just never knew the kind of hell that my dad and granddad, what they went through to put bread on the table. And so I think that our generation and the younger generations, I think that we need to be raw, and we need to be honest with these young people, and we need to tell them that it's going to be hard out here. This stuff's going to be rough, and life is not going to get any easier as you get older. It's going to get harder.
I mean, I smile because that is raw honesty, and I never would have thought at my age I would be dealing with the same things that I did as a young man. But the reality is, it's forever a struggle. And when you were talking, I remember I was talking to my uncle. He was really the man that raised me. My father, although he was in a home, he was just there by presence alone. And but I had a beautiful mother. And I was on the phone with my uncle one day, and I said, Aunt, why didn't you tell me it would be so difficult to be a Black man in America? And he said, well, nephew, I started to, but I didn't want to ruin you too early. I knew you would find out sooner or later.
Wow. And
to witness these young Black boys coming up, sooner or later they have to deal with it. So I think while mentoring and all of these things are so important, being realistic and preparing them for the journey that they have to take and endure is so important. I want to open it up for some questions. We have about 15 minutes left. If you want to type in something that we can talk about, what's on your mind. We have okay, so we have that one answered. There was a question. Okay, we have, let me see here. I don't know if this is question 45 is a good start, but still, this is a response to somebody. I want to Here we go. Elijah says, I was wondering why the governor of each city can't fix their own policing. Why do they leave it up to a racist president who has proven over and over again he doesn't care? So really the question's about on the local level, you know, how do we address policing on the local level? That's for anyone.
I can jump in first, Michael, because I kind of spoke on it earlier. And that was one reason why I was really dejected again, was because the fact that in many of these cities, we've had African-American leadership, and at the mayoral level, at the police chief level. But what we're seeing is really not necessarily, you know, policy reforms that always need to be changed, but a reformation of the heart. And that was the issue that I was saying earlier about the chokeholds. I'm not saying that, you know, banning chokeholds was not a good idea, but when you want to kill someone, you're going to find a way to kill someone. And this, in the Derek Chauvin situation, he had his mind made up that he was going to stay on that man's neck for that long. And what didn't happen was he didn't turn into a humanitarian, didn't want to preserve and protect life, but instead he chose to do the opposite, which was to end it. And that's really where the root of this problem has to change. It's really got to come down to the human heart. Of course, policies are very necessary, and there's a lot of systemic issues that need to be worked out and things that we can rectify. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to the human condition. And whether that goes for whether you're an officer or not. The day before George Floyd, we all watched the man in the bird watcher, I forgot his name, Cooper, who got the police call to him in a situation where, you know, him being a black man seemed to be weaponized by the lady who made a false police report or exaggerated police report. So I would say it really comes down to that. And as far as each level of government, there are responsibilities there, but I would say that the issue is really deeper than even anything we've seen in the past, or deeper than I knew that it really was in the past. Because I, once upon a time, was one of those who believed that, yeah, if we just got, you know, representation in all these cities, all this would change. Now I'm seeing it's going to actually take a lot more than that.
And I think although it's a good question, it is one that requires a detailed response beyond our conversation here today. What I will say is there is a concerted effort to destruct the police departments around the country. We see that in Minneapolis, where the 13 council members voted to do that very same thing. Over the next year, they'll be looking at what does policing look like. They're reimagining policing, and I think that's a really great strategy to you know, some people say defund the police department, but it means more than that. It's reimagining policing in Black and brown communities and taking a community approach to designing what that mechanism is. I think that is the answer. And I think you have to get, you know, and I'm a big, you know, I'm from Wisconsin, I'm a big union guy, but I believe FOPs need to go away. We need to get rid of police unions. They have too much power, they protect officers, and that's just not how you're gonna serve and protect a community. So those would be my thoughts on that.
They're actually working on that. They have a website, if any of you are maybe familiar with. Have you heard of defund12.org?
No, I have not.
Okay, well, that's all 50 states are loading up their information for different cities to defund the police department in cities in all 50 states, and reallocate the money for community programs, education, et cetera, for minorities in their communities. I'll plug the link in here, and then you can click on it to check it out. It's gaining a lot of momentum. Defund12.org.
I see it. And Jamie has a question here that says, Michael, I don't believe white children should be sheltered from the realities of racism, police brutality, inequality in America. For the white folks that have children or one day will, what do you want them to know about the Black male experience? What do you want those parents to do? That's a very important question. We want white parents to know the experience for themselves and then to teach it, to share it, to make sure that their children are informed about true American history. That and come from a place where you recognize that they're not going to get that in school. So you have to do that in your homes. You don't want your kids to be ignorant of the society in which they live in. So even as grandparents, teaching your grandkids the realities of Black and brown people in this country, the realities of the racism against immigration and the LGBTQ community, teaching those true histories is so important because we break the cycle. By knowledge, people are free. And we have to take that responsibility, see that as your responsibility. Nieces and nephews, see that as your responsibility to them, to teach them. But you have to know for yourself first. That's the key. You have to learn it yourself in order to pass it on. And seeing that as an obligation to American society, as your citizenship in this democracy. That's the only way. That's the only way, as Jonathan talked about, the hearts start right there with young people in your home, teaching them that racism, discrimination is wrong. And wouldn't it be such a wonderful thing for, little Steve to stand up in elementary school for his Black or brown friend and say, this is wrong. It shouldn't happen like this. That's what we're talking about. It seemed like you were going to say something, Brother Tim.
Well, I think I agree with everything everyone said. I also believe that we need to let kids know that we're all humans. That we're all, because once we get into from the youth are the most impressionable people, and if we can raise them with the experience with what the Black race and any other person that's suffered in the world has been through, then we can all start thinking like humanitarians. I mean, it's a lot that needs to be done, particularly, for the situations we're talking about as well, but before we can fully get there. Or we could just make a choice and decide to be like that, But I think that I was gonna say something else, but I completely forgot what I was gonna say. But I think it's just a matter of making sure that the kids know that we're all human, and that cultural differences is not really a bad thing. It's been turned into a bad thing. Think about it. All the white supremacists love Mexican food. All the white supremacists love. So you look at food, people indulge in each other's culture. People literally, we could not have the diet that we have without cultural influences from all over the world. The most racist white person will tear some soul food up, tear some Chinese food up, tear some Mexican food up. So cultural differences are supposed to be a way that we can all grow, expand, and learn from one another. But people's ego get in the way and go, oh, that's different. I don't want to learn nothing. That's different. I fear it because it's different. So instead of me learning about it, I'm gonna put it in a box and I'm gonna ego trip with it so that I can feel better about myself, because I don't want to acknowledge that the racism that I'm expressing is really fear. I mean, that might be a lot to say to a kid, but I'm just saying that teach the kid that cultural differences is good and that we're all human. And at the end of the day, you judge somebody by their heart and by how they treat you and what kind of human being they are. You get to know somebody and you get to feel that person's vibe before you judge their character. That's what I would teach. That's what I teach my younger relatives.
Get to them before they're tainted. Pamela says, do you gentlemen recommend the movement to support Black businesses? Is that kind of simple financial act one Black business owner appreciates or desires? I think you should support Black businesses, small businesses. The Black wealth, when you had white flight, when the suburbs were built, all that money left the Black community. And I think it's really important that Black businesses be supported in this time, such as this. And try not to take your money to the larger corporations. I know it's easier to order from Amazon. I get it. I do a lot of that too. But what I'm saying is we do, I believe in supporting Black businesses. I spend money in the Black community. And we need, if we're going to rebuild those communities, how do we do that without supporting their businesses? It's impossible. And what I want to say, because we're going to be wrapping this up, and I truly appreciate all of you tuning in and listening to us, and also adding your voice. And what I want to say to you is, number one, get educated on the Black experience. It's not that hard. Do it with an open mind. Approach it as if you know nothing and grow from there. But I'm also going to challenge you on your relationships. How many Black friends do you have? Have you been to a Black restaurant? Are you part of a diverse organization, a Black organization, one that recognizes all of our cultures, and build relationships with minority people? If you want to help them know them, you can't help if you don't know. And so I'm calling on you to do these things. And I think this is part of the solution. It's not all the solution, but it's part of the solution. And the fact that we have our white brothers and sisters on here, Native brothers and sisters on here, Latino brothers and sisters on here, that is what we need. This is not just a struggle for Black humanity. It's a struggle for all of our humanity. We're all in this together. And if you can see yourself as being part of this, you know, Ralph Ellison said, the trouble with Americans is they simply don't know who they are. And I think there's an awakening of who we are and what we are and how truly we are connected. We are brothers and sisters. And at the end of the day, we must love each other and support each other. Regardless of our skin or our gender or who we choose to love, we must love each other. And so I ask you to join with me as we move forward and make our world a better place. We didn't get here overnight, okay? Oppression has been around a long time. We're not going to solve this overnight. This is a long journey, but let us walk this journey together, because history will speak of us. Somewhere in the distant future, a scribe will reach down deep into the archives of our time, and what will she find? Will she discover that we overcame our differences? Will she find that out of many, we became one? Or will she find that we solved nothing and remain a divided people? Yes, history will speak of us. Thank you, Brother Jonathan, Alonzo, Jamar, Brother Tim. Thank you so much. We will reconvene with more of these. Thank you so much, and be in touch. Reach out. Don't be a stranger.
No doubt. Salute.
Salute.
Take care.